Hello, everybody who has joined so far. We're going to wait just a minute to make sure whoever is joining joins before we get started. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining today's webinar. The topic of this next Pointerpro Academy installment is Boost Your Employee Development with More Effective HR Assessments. And my name is Stacy Demas. I am the sales manager here at Pointerpro, and I'm very happy to take you through this presentation today. So while Pointerpro is a tool that's ideal for different groups, consultants, coaches, HR professionals alike. Today's session will be specifically tailored for HR professionals. And when I say this term HR professionals, I think you know what I mean, but those who are consulting in the area of HR or are leading or part of HR teams within larger organizations. Over the past years, we've seen that our customers who fall in this industry are looking for an agile assessment tool that allows them to build their own assessments and reports that are either used with clients, if they are HR consultants, or internally with their employees. And they're often, finding Pointerpro, and they find it to provide a solution for a very specific type of assessment, perhaps an employee capabilities assessment. But then they discover that with the flexibility of our tool, they can also migrate over or build other types of assessments as well. And so that's kind of what, today I want to talk about is, maybe you have a capabilities assessment, maybe you're thinking about a 360 assessment, and to kind of show and tell more about different use cases that we see HR consultants using our tool for. And we will focus on actually implementation and the features that enable these different use cases within Pointerpro. So I will go to the next slide. When we talk about HR or employee assessments, I'm certainly not going to cover everything, but what we see mainly are pre-employment assessments being built in our tool. So these can be personalities assessments. You think of the DISC, when you're looking to hire somebody, who is this person? What are their personality traits? Will they fit in with the team? As well as skills assessments during the hiring process. That's certainly common as well. The other sort of group of assessments we see being built are for ongoing employee development. Well-being or burnout sort of assessments are often seen, as well as this, again, bringing back the skills assessments, capability, competency, whatever term that your organization uses. The idea is you're seeing how an employee is, or how well an employee is able to perform certain jobs or duties. Then going to the next one, we also see some like leadership development or management assessments to qualify employees perhaps for a promotion, or just to see, how is the running state of things today with management or leadership teams. And then we get down to the 360 assessment. So this is really where it gets interesting, with lots of dynamic groups of respondents whose scores or whose responses all need to be brought into one report. So how can that be done with Pointerpro? We're going to cover that one as well. So we're going to start with the most, let's say simple, the most straightforward sort of assessment, and then slowly get into the more dynamic or complex assessment types. So the first one would be an individual assessment, meaning and this is certainly a personality assessment would fit into this category. So I am taking my own individual assessment about myself, and then receiving a report that's really based on my scores of my assessment. So personality assessments such as a DISC or other custom personality assessments can be built with Pointerpro using mainly the custom scoring feature that allows you to allocate scores or points depending upon how the respondent answers their questions, but also trigger an overall outcome or an overall personality type based on scores per question and also logic within that questionnaire. And the way that this is done is that, depending upon how the respondents answer questions, you can route points to different outcomes. So in a DISC, we have 4 different sort of overarching groups or personality types that need points allocated towards them, so that then you can tell somebody, oh, okay, they're mostly a C in the DISC profile. And that can be done by using our outcomes feature, the multiple outcomes feature, in order to tell the person, okay, this is your primary driver, primary DISC type. And so what you can then do in Pointerpro is first show to the respondent on the final screen of the assessment their overarching type. In this case, in this example here, we see the influence type receiving 35%, and the other 4 DISC profiles, you see the percentage scores there. So those were calculated based on the scores that you had allocated for the questions, or the scores that are allocated, actually, in this case, towards the overall outcome being influenced in this case, depending upon how the questions were answered. And then you can also allow the respondent to download their PDF report from that final screen that takes the individual through their scores or through their outcome in greater detail. And that's where you can really give that feedback depending upon what outcome they had received on that personality assessment. Personality assessment, it's mostly based on the custom scoring and the outcomes, and then, routing those scores to feedback in the report. Another type of individual report that we see being built in our platform could be a sort of management self-assessment. So imagine that you are working with an organization and you want to get or improve the level of the managers within that organization. You can have them take a self-assessment where they answer questions about their skills in different areas, such as leadership, communication, etc. How do they see themselves in working with that team? And then depending upon their scores on these different overarching categories, they can receive personalized feedback in the report. Now, typically speaking, you will assess that individual in many questions that are grouped into categories, such as how well do you fit into the community of your manager peers? Do you have a clear team vision? Do you have empathy and care for your team? So if you have different what you can do with Pointerpro is to group these questions into question blocks so that they are seen on the same screen when that manager is taking the assessment, or, you don't have to group them on the same screen. But then based upon these groupings of questions, you can then set up formulas that will calculate the score of all of the score received from all the questions within that one category. And that would be the formulas feature here. Now, the thing with the formulas feature as well, sorry, I jumped forward, is that these, you can do a bit more with the formulas if you so choose. And that's where I get to when I say do more, I mean that you can also pull in the scores of other respondents from that same organization into the formula calculations. And then in the report, not only tell the manager via the dynamic and conditional feedback text that you put in there, not only tell them feedback per category, but also show them how they're comparing to the rest of a group. And that group can be just the other managers within their organization. And that's in fact what was built in this example. So you see this column chart that shows in the dark purple how the manager themselves scored in each of the 4 categories of the assessment, but also how all other managers within the organization scored on average. And that will kind of help them to, see how they're fitting in with the group. And with the formula feature in Pointerpro, you do have the option to include multiple responses in that formula calculation. So basically then when you're building the chart in the report, you'll reference the formulas that you had created just based on those question blocks for the individual. But then you'll also create a second set of formulas that have this toggle turned on, which can then show how they're comparing to either everybody who's taken the assessment so far or a specific group, such as the other managers within their organization. So this is a little tip that, an individual assessment report can also include a bit of comparison to others to give a bit more contextualized feedback to that manager, how they're comparing to others. Okay. Next, I move to the another type of reporting or assessments that can be created with Pointerpro. So in the past, we actually only had the individual sort of assessment and reporting capabilities, but now we've opened it up. We've developed some new things based upon, of course, feedback from users that include group reporting and individual versus group reporting. So yeah, while an individual report would be based upon just one response to the assessment or mainly based on it, an aggregate report would be a report that's based on multiple responses, and some more dynamic benchmarking data can also be incorporated there, and that's all brought into one report. And then specifically when you look at the feature in Pointerpro, with our new aggregate reports feature, when you're building that report, you choose what sort of report it will be. So the system then knows, okay, this is going to be a report that's really summing up an entire organization's scores or the scores of the sales department within organization 1, but maybe in organization 2, you're looking at just the marketing department, or the individual versus group. And that's really, we will highlight the 360 assessments when we get to that type of report. Now, when you're looking at, for example, a digital skills assessment, the example we see on the left here, it's important to note that it doesn't need to be one or the other. So when you're having, individuals maybe take a skills assessment, you can always, in Pointerpro, build one report that is really just specifically tailored to the individual. So I still get my sort of learning, my feedback to improve my skills. But then you can also pull back and build and produce a report that would, give a picture of how a group of respondents scored on that, in this case, skills assessment. So this, for example, could be utilized when you're looking at a sort of, let's give a well-being assessment example, or a burnout assessment. And so, it's really important for an individual to see, how at risk they are for a burnout via an individual self-assessment. But then when you're if as an HR professional, if you're consulting for that organization, you're going to want to tell them, looking at the average scores of everybody from your organization or everybody from this team or at that specific branch, we see that in general, your population is at a higher risk of burnout compared to the other organizations we've seen. And here's some strategies to improve the culture of your work to avoid such things. For example, so that would be the case where you might have two different types of reports configured with the same assessment. And potential use cases within this aggregate reporting sort of group could be that sort of team report where you're giving scores per category based on an entire team's assessments. The 360 reports is when we get into these comparisons of different groupings, the self, the manager, the peers, the direct reports, and then benchmarking reports. This has really been a interesting sort of report that many Pointerpro customers use to sort of benchmark their clients against others within their industry. But this can be used to benchmark maybe a team versus the general population or the entire set of employees within an organization as well. Now, when we look at actually building one of these sort of group reports in Pointerpro, one example could be an organizational health assessment. So really to check on the pulse of that organization. And the features that are utilized in Pointerpro include the custom scoring and the formulas feature, as well as the aggregate reports feature. No surprise there. So what's important here when you're doing a sort of assessment that's going to look at the scores of different teams within an organization to give that full picture of, okay, how well is the organization doing as a whole. What you'll use is the formulas feature to calculate scores for each of either the questions or the categories we often see of the assessment, filtered by different teams within that organization. And so in the screenshot here, you see that, like, for example, there are formulas being calculated for 3 different categories for just the sales team, and then formulas will be calculated that bring in the responses of the marketing team. Imagine there's a development team or a operations team as well that you might want to calculate. Well, this can all be done with the formulas feature, and you'll just need to tell the system that you're going to use not only multiple responses in that formula calculation, but a filtered set of responses. And then in one report, you can compare the scores of different teams within the organization to get that good picture of how everybody is doing. Now, then when the report itself is actually downloaded, using these aggregate report features, you're either going to be downloading the report based on all of the responses from the organization, and then within that report, it will do those comparisons between the sales team, the marketing team, operations team, etc. But it could be also that you are going to pull a group report that is just based on the data from one team. And it's not going, and then the feedback is, specifically, oh, okay, you as a sales team aren't doing that well in this area. You're doing really well in this area. Here's how you compare to the other teams. But then that feedback can be really targeted toward just the audience that won the sales team in this example. And so that filtering then will take place when you, as the Pointerpro admin user, are downloading the report. And at that moment, you can actually choose what custom filter you want to apply, so that then only the responses of one of these teams is included in the report itself. So, for example, if you were to filter by the sales team, then the aggregate report would just pull the scores of that team. You can use the different charts and graphs options that we have to show how the team is comparing, for example, to the minimum, maximum. You can use also standard deviation variables, or compare to all of the respondents from that organization overall, and just do the comparison with the sales team to them. That would be possible. You can also then tell about how they scored on average on the different categories of the assessment, of course. And then thirdly, give actual text feedback, of course, of how that sales team is doing. Okay, yeah, that's my last slide for the group report type of report. And then finally, we're going to get into the 360 assessments. Now, we see more and more often that people are looking for flexible tools to build 360s. And that is because, there are out there on the market the ability to buy pre-configured or pre-written 360 assessments, but we are hearing often from organizations that they have their own sort of pillars or areas that the employees should be assessed under that don't really fit into the cookie cutter 360s that you can purchase. So they want to be able to set up their own categories or their own questions that are really tailored towards their own organization, or if you're a consultant, towards your own methodology that you're then presenting to your customer. So different features that are important with 360s are, of course, custom scoring formulas, but also some logic in there to get different groups of respondents through the questionnaire with questions that are really tailored towards their position in accordance to the subject of the 360. So when we look at building an actual 360 assessment, what you're able to do with Pointerpro is to create different versions of the questions, so different question sets within one assessment. And typically what we see is that one question set should be tailored for the subject of the 360. So these are I statements, like I regularly come to work on time, or I communicate well with my peers. And those questions are often sort of rating questions. So I can rate myself on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 1 to whatever for each of those statements. But then of course, when you're having a 360 assessment, you're also asking, the manager or supervisor or whatever term you use of that subject. You're asking their peers, their direct reports, perhaps their customers as well, about how that person is doing in these different areas. And so thus, a second question set should be created and only shown to the raters and not to the subject that says, oh, how does Stacy do in this area? How good is Stacy's communication, rated on a scale of 1 to 5? So with Pointerpro, then you can use our question logic feature, which we see on this slide, to hide or show questions depending upon who that respondent is. So that's the first important feature for 360 assessments. What you can also do with the 360 built in Pointerpro is, in fact, kind of choose the flow you want of the 360. And that's the first question that I ask when I'm talking to somebody interested in building a 360 on Pointerpro is, in an ideal world, is it already known in advance if or who the subject is, and also who their manager, their peers, their direct reports, etc. are? Because in that case, what you can do is you can upload all those contacts to Pointerpro and send out an email invitation to all those people up front, and as well as like reminder emails, of course, too. And so then all of those respondents are already pre-defined and invited at once. Or or is it that you would like the subject, the subject of the 360 to be able to invite their own raters? And that's also an option with Pointerpro. So lots of flexibility here on what you would prefer. In this case, I'm highlighting the fact that actually the subject can take their self-assessment, only see the questions that are logical for them, and then fill in at the end the names and email addresses of the people that they would like to invite to assess them. And at that moment, with Pointerpro, the email template feature, an email can automatically be sent out to those raters that invites them to take the assessment for Stacy or for whomever. Next, again, the formulas come in. The assessment is typically going to be broken into categories, and then you use those same sort of features that I showed for the group reporting to actually calculate formulas for different rater types in this case. So instead of different departments or different teams for the group reports, it would be per rater type. And then using the formula filters, you'll be able to specify which responses should be incorporated into those formula calculations. Now, what's coming very soon, which is a feature that will be able to be utilized both for 360s and for those group reports that we talked about previously, is the ability to create predefined filters. So then basically for a 360, you would create 3 or more different rater types in the predefined filters area. And then this will simplify the formula creation, because then you would only need to create one formula for each of the categories of the assessment. And then when you're using the formulas actually in the PDF report, you can then specify that, okay, I want to use formula 1, which is all about the score for the communication of the subject. And I want to use formula 1 for managers, or formula 1 for peers, or formula 1 for direct reports. And then the system will match up that predefined filter with the formula calculation. Then when we look at the 360 reporting that you can do, that you can build in Pointerpro, you'll then use those formulas to, for example, to use on a charter graph in the report. This is, again, our column chart. And you'll be able to delineate how different types of respondents scored per category, and really give that powerful visual that compares, so that the subject of the 360 can see, how they think they're doing compared to how all these other parties are doing. You see as well in this screenshot that you can also just tell them, like, numerically what their scores are of each of these different roles for each category. And then, to take it a step further, you can also then give feedback of, for example, you, the subject, you scored yourself higher than all the other raters did in this category. So actually, you have some improvement that needs to be made in this category, and here are our suggestions. So really giving that personalized feedback based on how the subject scored compared to others. That in a nutshell is all the different, well, not all, but a sum up of the general or the most common use cases we see HR professionals using in Pointerpro. Here on this slide, we see, again, it's been shown in a few of the other Pointerpro Academy webinars, but the 4 A's of Pointerpro. With our system, first you can ask the questions, so the actual assessment itself, questionnaire itself. You can then, use the tool to assess how that individual or group is doing via logic and formula calculations. You can advise in the format of a personalized PDF report. And then with an add-on to Pointerpro, you can use the aggregate report features that we discussed to build those different dynamic group reports. And then, the fourth is assign and attract. So if you're using our distributor license, in fact, this aggregate report feature set is included in that license, so that you can create individual, group, and individual versus group reports, but also the distribution portal to allow others to distribute the assessments. So I believe that's my final slide. Yeah, that is. Going to any questions. So if you have any questions, please send them in the chat. I see that there's one question so far. In the 360 assessment example you showed, there's a table with star ratings in different aspects. Is that also built in Pointerpro? So it is. I'm going to go back a few slides. This report is built in Pointerpro. This chart, though, or table, I guess, is not one of our standard charts and graphs. Like the one on the to the right of it, the column chart is a standard one. This was actually developed as a custom built chart by our professional services team. So you can always keep that in mind as well with these sorts of 360 reports. You know, there can often be lots of calculations, lots of intricacies to the logic, but also we see that our customers are looking sometimes for a very specific chart or graph that we don't have off the shelf, and our team is able to build, either just that chart or graph, or implement the entire assessment report for you in the system as a project. Any other questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining this edition of the Pointerpro Academy. Bye-bye.